Welcome back to the Solutions Series, brought to you by DoubleRadius and hosted by yours truly, Jeff Holdenred. Today, we have a special guest today. We have Erik Randall from Baicells. Welcome, Erik.
Hello.
So, Erik, real quick before we get into Baicells, can you give me a little bit of history of yours? Where'd you come from? Kind of your background, how you ended up at Baicells, those kind of things.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I'm Erik Randall. I'm the channel manager here at Baicells. I have a very, very strong technical background. So the last 12 years I've spent in distribution, but on the support engineering side. With Baicells, I've learned and become part of Baicells probably about 4 years ago when they first introduced their LTE certification class. With that certification class, I've learned Baicells really well. The people are awesome, and I've gravitated toward that product and that vendor significantly. So as our relationship continued to develop, I learned more and more and more about them, and I really look forward to working for them until the right position opened, and then that's how I ended up here. So what I'm doing now with Baicells as the channel manager is I'm responsible for the partnership between Baicells and all of our partners. I'll do presentations, trainings, partner engagement, and anything the partner needs at all. At the end of the day, I am here to be a knowledge resource for our partners.
Good. That's awesome. So yeah, and we've, as y'all know, Baicells and DoubleRadius have had a relationship for a long period of time. We have some people here at DoubleRadius that came from Baicells, and we have some people from DoubleRadius that are now at Baicells. So it's been a great relationship, especially supplying LTE solutions to the market space. So let's get into what are some of the roadblocks that you're seeing people today stumble on with LTE that maybe they should know ahead of time, or maybe we can solve that by telling them about it now to help them be successful with LTE?
I think some of the major roadblocks with LTE, the first major one is the complexity of it. So you have your regular network that you deal with, but with LTE, you add in SIM cards and how that SIM's provisioned with the Evolved Packet Core, the EPC itself. Uh, that is a major complexity. And how Baicells helps overcome that hurdle is they put everything in the cloud with a single source of easy provisioning. So that SIM card is now done in the cloud. You have the security of a regular EPC, but it's in the cloud and it's easier to use.
So talking about EPC, all right. So I think that's one of the key things here that I think we can educate people on. For all these years, it has been like a point to multi-point fixed wireless network. You assign your IP addresses, you rock and roll. All right. So in an LTE network, you still have your radio and antenna and CPE, but you just mentioned the EPC. What exactly are those extra parts and pieces above the radios, that LTE brings to the table? And what exactly do they do?
So the EPC, what it does is it gives a single source of provisioning for each subscriber. So each subscriber now can be its own entity with its own security, its own throughput, its own package. So that's what the EPC allows. But on top of that, the EPC also gives you a place to set up an entire group of individuals in a quicker way of deploying it. This EPC now gives you the advantage of taking that SIM card, that little subscriber information, and going from one device to another device to another. So you can now use your iPhone, your Samsung Nexus devices. You can use any device you want with these LTE networks.
And so, is there any other parts and pieces to LTE, or is that pretty much so you have your radios and your EPC, right?
That's basically the main difference between your LTE network and your typical point to multi-point is just that addition of the EPC and the SIM cards.
Okay. So in an LTE, we always hear private LTE. We also hear, just LTE networks. Where are you seeing like the primary deployments of LTE today?
So one thing you just touched on was, the aspect of private LTE versus LTE network. It really means one and the same. So when someone says private LTE network, they're just referring to not an LTE network on T-Mobile or Verizon or AT&T. So that private part is kind of it really doesn't have to be added on. So don't let that bother you and confuse you when someone says private LTE. It is just an LTE network, and it's private because it's your network. It's not part of a public entity like Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile.
That's a perfect thank you because that's one of the things I think that got me for a long time was there was a private LTE when really it's just adding one word to the word LTE and then making things seem difficult even though they're not.
Yeah, so with the private LTE, a lot of people before it came to like the WISP operators that we currently use, private LTE was more considered for a mining facility where they would be their own little entity on top of AT&T coming in. They would have their own private LTE network in this small space. So that's kind of where the private LTE network evolved from.
Now, question for you, and I'm going to throw you a curveball on this one a little bit. Over the years, we always have like the CPEs, and it's been like, Cat 15, Cat 3, whatever. Can you tell me what the differences are between the cats or the categories or whatever, how that works?
Yeah, so right now in what we predominantly deal with the fixed wireless in these categories, the categories are like category 4, 6, 12, 15. They're the dominating factors right now. They continue to evolve. I believe our iPhones right now are category 23ish, somewhere up there. So a category 4 is just the low end of the spectrum. It allows for a single carrier, so max of 20 megahertz. It doesn't do anything more than 2 by 2 MIMO. Whereas when you get into the category 6, it does two carriers down. It does your 4x4 MIMO. When you get up into that 12 and 15, that's when you're doing even more carriers and more MIMO is allowed. So essentially, as you're evolving these steps, these categories, you're allowed more features and more advancements within LTE itself.
So, are you seeing different, are you seeing different receive sensitivities and all that on these category CPEs? Like, for instance, like if I was deploying a category 4, are we seeing like a better receive sensitivity out of a category 4 than if we go to a 6 or a 15, or is it just your multi-carrier, higher speeds, more MIMOs?
It is predominantly just the higher speeds, more MIMO.
Okay.
Uh, each one though the categories they'll have their own antenna with high gain or low gain antennas, and that's
Mhm.
where you're going to see the change in receive sensitivities. The other aspect of going from a higher category though is right now category 4 it stops at 64 QAM on the downlink, whereas when you move up into the category 12-15 it does go up to 256 QAM on the modulation side.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's a big beneficial there on on the modulation schemes, higher throughputs and everything else. That's perfect.
Mhm.
Perfect. So um, you know, are you guys seeing a lot of? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the 2.5 auction and everything like that that's been going on. We all have our own opinions on it, and I'm not going to ask you your opinion on it, just for where you see the 2.5 going. But how much 2.5 are you guys seeing in your space right now? And do you still see that as like a big growth place for the future?
So the 2.5, I think it is kind of big in North America. So the tribal nations they have access to 2.5. A lot of EDU spaces they have access to 2.5. You mentioned the auction. The auction's allowing for more people to get involved in 2.5. 2.5 is predominantly the old Sprint, the T-Mobile network.
Hmm.
So that auction is going to allow Sprint and T-Mobile to bid on it right along with operators as well. So we're actually seeing a lot of push in different areas, especially like the Appalachian Mountains where you need a little bit more penetration.
Hmm.
Those operators are looking a lot more at this auction than what you would normally find.
Hmm.
So with this auction coming up, I can see a lot more movement toward these operators in these spaces where they really need that extra um, penetration into the woods.
Hmm. Yeah, because I know that over time we've had the 5 gigahertz band is basically a line of sight band. Then 365 came out as a near and non line of sight. But in all the operators that I talked to today, especially the WISPs, if they have the ability to use 2.5, it has the ability to hit those clients that they have not been able to hit with 5 gig and CBRS. So they've been deploying 2.5 to actually hit those hard to reach areas. Is that what you're seeing too?
That's exactly what I'm seeing. It makes complete sense too, because as you lower your frequency, you have better penetration into those areas.
Hmm. Hmm.
And with the
Yeah.
addition of LTE and multipath, the 2.5 is an awesome spectrum.
Cool. Cool. That's awesome. I appreciate the input on that one. So you guys, I think if I remember correctly, you guys released a new radio this year, or maybe it was at the end of last year. It was, I think it's the 846.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like your new dog base station, right? So what is that bringing to the table?
So actually, we released a couple of new products.
Okay.
The 846 is one, and what it brings to the table is two radios in one housing like we normally do, but this is 4x4 instead of your typical 2x2, and this is going to allow for better, well, not really better penetration, but it allows for better signal to come back and forth. It also allows for more throughput because you have more antennas sending and receiving. The other products we had are a 430i, and it basically dual carrier and a small function, great for smaller environments.
So we see a lot of people today, looking at or doing like micro pop setups.
Hmm.
And, especially, you had mentioned the Appalachian Mountains. So like down the East Coast, I see a lot of clients where they have a pocket of people here and a pocket of people there. What product are you seeing is kind of a best fit that you guys offer that suits that micro pop scenario?
So with the MicroPops, it all depends on what you're looking at with the MicroPops. So you
Hmm.
have an area like an RV park. So
Hmm.
in RV park, you want a smallish cell as possible to where it's not that busy and it doesn't look that bad. So in a case like that, we would do a 430.
Hmm.
It allows for 40 megahertz and it hits the areas needed to hit, and it's a very small cell. Now, if you do a small subdivision where you could put up a 60-foot tower, that's where
Hmm.
you want to deploy the 846. You could take advantage of whatever antenna you want to use, whether it's 65 or 120, and you can
Hmm.
really hit the entire area you need to hit with the throughput that these customers desire.
Hmm. Perfect. Perfect. Um, so what other market spaces are you seeing today that are popping up that maybe shocked you or you see kind of pushing harder or growing more than you really expected? I mean, outside of the WISP space, where are you seeing LTE push that was kind of a surprise?
So I don't think there's any spaces that surprises me. I feel that CBRS is slow to be adopted, honestly.
Hmm.
Where we're seeing the most growth right now is going to be in your enterprise spaces, like your EDUs as well.
Hmm.
So I personally feel like when CBRS was first announced and this spectrum became available, that EDU space, the MDU space, these products, the indoor products, are perfect for that space, but it was very, very slow to adopt. Now the EDU space is starting to take off with all of the different options that LTE provides. Because of LTE being, a standard, you don't have to conform to one. You could use all. So we are starting to see a lot more adoption into CBRS and LTE now than 3 years ago when CBRS first launched.
Gotcha. And are you seeing, because I know you also offer, like an indoor CPE, are you seeing more and more kind of use of an indoor CPE?
So the indoor CPE is actually great uses for, again, the EDU space. We have one example in Vegas where they went to deploy, they needed a quick solution, easy to roll out solution. So what
Mhm.
they did is they set up four 436s and a 360, and right around, a half a mile, they were able to hand out students to these indoor units. The
Mhm.
indoor units will just go, pointing toward the tower right in front of a window, and that house now has an easy to deploy. You don't have to roll a truck, set it right out there, and the students are now connected back to the school's network.
That's cool. That's cool. So talking about appointments. So and I know that you've been with buy sells a short time now, but this could even be from your past history, and your experiences with buy sells. Is there one particular deployment like that you can tell us about that was just like it sticks in your head as like awe, or maybe it was like a big community win, or something that did good for the community that you can share with us?
I think the Vegas example is probably the best example of, what LTE can do and how buy cells can help support a community. So when the pandemic hit back in, 2020, early 2020, school systems were struggling trying to figure out how they can continue to allow students to work remotely. Wi-Fi doesn't give you the coverage you need, so they were trying to figure out these solutions, whether it's proprietary or LTE. So what BuyCells brought to the table is a fast, easy to deploy solution, almost plug and play. So what the city of Las Vegas did is, again, they put up the system and they were able to deploy and continue having their students up and running within 45 days.
Mhm.
But now the kicker to that is they have this great LTE network. What else can they do with it? So they're trying to figure out other ways of evolving this network and how they can use it. So one thing they're looking at now is having sensors throughout the city of saying, hey, this dumpster is getting full. We need to send out a trash dumpster to unload it. So for me, the all is the fact that you can take an LTE network and say, all right, beautiful, I have this up and running, but now what else can I do with it? And
Mhm.
with LTE, there's so many more things you can do with it.
Okay. Just throwing out a whim here, are you guys seeing anything on the agricultural space?
Yes, we are. So again, that's why LTE is so perfect for almost every deployment. So private LTE with this, you
Mhm.
can put out, an 846 covering 360 degrees, and you could get 3 to 5 miles easy in the agriculture space. To where now at each one of your tractors, each one of your little well sites or your watering cans, you'll know, and you could get all that data back via LTE instead of using the other technologies.
Oh, that's perfect. So, last question for you. You don't want to take up too much of your time today. If you had a crystal ball, right, or maybe it's just your opinion, where do you see LTE over the next, 1 to 3 to 5 years?
I'm new at buy sells,
Hmm.
and part of why I came to buy sells is because of that crystal ball.
Okay.
I really like LTE. I like where it's progressing, where it's going. So as we move into the 4G, into the 5G space, we're going to see so many more use cases with all of the throughput, all of the additions that 5G adds to it. And there's so many different options that you can do with this. So we're going to be using 50 megahertz channels, 100 megahertz channels, getting us up into that 1 gig category for throughput. And that's what everyone's desiring. LTE is moving into warehouses at a significant rate to where autonomous vehicles, autonomous robots, it's happening more and more as we speak. And it's exciting being part of that march, that step into the future to see how it's going to progress. So for me, it's just watching that 1 to 3 years of how LTE is going to progress into the next step, and then seeing our products actually fit into that mold.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
So, operators out there, one of the things I was excited about doing this meeting and talk about LTE is, the service provider industry has done an amazing job of bringing broadband to the unserved, the underserved, helping out with the education space, helping people connect to their schools, their work. Everybody's doing virtual meetings these days. But when you look at LTE, if you kind of think out of your box, okay, I can get connectivity here, but what else can you do with it? I think LTE is going to be a future, roadmap of ways with our creativity of bringing connectivity. Now, let's figure out what else we can do with it. What else can we connect? What other problems can we solve? And I think LTE is going to help kind of fix those and open up, other revenue streams for our operators rather than just bringing broadband to the area.
No,
So,
I agree completely on that one. That's a great point.
yeah. So, Eric, thank you again for your time today. I really appreciate you talking to us about LTE, talking to us about what's going on at buy cells, sharing some feedback on a few things. And, until next time, we'll bring you back again. All right. So, thank you for your time. It was a pleasure doing this. I hope you had fun. And
All right, I did. I enjoyed this. Thank you very much, Jeff.
good. We'll do this again. All right, Eric, you have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
All right, take care, man.
Thanks, guys. Bye.